There is a darkness known only to the soul, an icy silence that settles in the bones when hope seems but a distant memory. It is the chill of a concrete cell, the weight of an oppressor's gaze, the feeling of being reduced to a number, a nameless shadow. We all fear this place, this abyss of dehumanization. But what happens when this same abyss forges a weapon no one could have foreseen? What does it take for a human spirit to not only break its chains, but to transform them into a sharp, unforgiving sword? This is the story of a woman who faced this darkness head-on. To the decorated officers of a war machine that believed itself invincible, she was insignificant, just another anonymous face in the throng of subjugated men, a problem to be contained and forgotten. They saw her, but they didn't see her. They couldn't see the spark that burned behind her weary eyes, a flame of defiance that refused to be extinguished by brutality and hunger. And this failure of perception, this arrogance, would be the seed of their undoing, for they stood before the woman who would not only accomplish an impossible escape, but who would then return to become their worst nightmare. Imagine for a moment the texture of that despair. The fetid air of an overcrowded barracks, the metallic taste of scarce water, the constant sound of boots on gravel that promised only more pain. The historical promise of that moment was annihilation, the total subjugation of peoples and ideals under a banner of tyranny. Each sunrise brought no hope, but only the continuation of a slow, methodical erosion of identity itself, a process designed to break the spirit before it even breaks the body. Against this backdrop of ashes, our protagonist's journey begins, not with a grand act of heroism, but with a silent, stubborn refusal to surrender. Pain was her constant companion, a shadow that followed her every step, every sleepless night. But instead of succumbing, she transformed the pain into a cocoon. She learned to observe, to listen, to catalog her captors' weaknesses, to memorize their routines, their complacency, the way they underestimated her with every dismissive glance. Validating her journey means understanding that strength wasn't born in a single moment of bravery, but was cultivated in 1,000 moments of suffering endured. Every injustice witnessed, every friend lost, every piece of moldy bread shared in secret, all of it was fertilizer for the root of a determination that grew deep within her. She was a seed buried beneath the concrete, waiting for the slightest crack so she could feel the sunlight again, no matter the cost. The world outside those barbed wires was a fading memory, a dream of colors in a monochromatic present. The regime's promise was clear. There was no escape, no future, only the perpetual present of servitude and fear. They built walls not just with bricks and wire, but with propaganda and psychological terror, ensuring that their prisoners' minds were as effective cells as physical ones. But they didn't count on the resilience of human memory. She clung to the memories of a life where she was free, where her name was spoken with love, not contempt. These remembrances were not a refuge for weakness, but an arsenal of strength. They were proof that another reality was possible, validation that her fight was not for a fantasy, but for the restoration of a world that had been stolen from her. This conviction was her invisible armor, a defense her oppressors could never penetrate. Her transformation from prisoner to legend was no accident. It was a decision made in the silence of her heart that passive survival was not enough. To survive was merely to postpone death. To resist was to affirm life. And so the promise of freedom began to take shape, not as a vague wish, but as a meticulous plan, an equation of risk and opportunity calculated in the dark hours of the night while others slept the sleep of the exhausted. The officers laughed, drank, and celebrated their victories, completely oblivious to the storm brewing beneath their roof. For them, order was established, power consolidated. The idea that a woman, alone and weakened, could challenge their system was absurd, almost comical. They were the masters of fate, the architects of a new era, and she was but an insignificant detail in their grand construction. But history is often written in the details, in the variables that the powerful refuse to consider. Her journey is the validation of a timeless truth. The greatest empires fall not by great armies, but by the silent corrosion of the indomitable will of those they oppress. She was that corrosion, that silent force, setting the stage for the moment when the entire structure would begin to crumble, shocking all who considered her part of the foundation. Delving into her fighting past is like feeling the biting chill of dawn on her thin skin. The escape plan wasn't a map drawn, but a web of observations woven over months. It was the pattern of the changing of the guard, the hesitation of a younger soldier, the blind spot of a watchtower that lasted mere seconds. Every detail was a piece of a deadly puzzle where a single mistake would mean the end. The barbed wire wasn't just a physical obstacle, it was a symbol, a steel monster she needed to tame. The night of her escape was a symphony of fear and precision. The sound of her own heartbeat was a war drum in her ears, each snap of a twig beneath her feet a cry of alarm. She moved like an apparition, a shadow gliding among other shadows, driven by an adrenaline rush that was part terror, part euphoria. Freedom was so close she could almost taste it, mingling with the bitter taste of the earth in her mouth as she dragged herself across the frozen ground. Supportive figures emerged in the most unexpected places, proving that humanity can flourish even in the most barren soil. There was the old woman in the camp kitchen who slipped an extra piece of bread into her hand with a look that said, "Fight." There was the prisoner who created a distraction at just the right moment, an anonymous act of sacrifice that bought her precious seconds. These small embers of kindness fueled her flame, reminding her that she wasn't fighting just for herself, but for all of them. Once freed from her immediate confinement, the real challenge began. The forest became her cathedral and her prison. For 72 hours she was hunted like an animal. The sound of dogs barking in the distance was the soundtrack to her torment. Each stream she crossed was an icy baptism, washing away her trail but also draining her body heat. Hunger was a constant ache, a beast gnawing at her insides. But with each step, with each hour she survived, the prisoner unraveled and the warrior emerged. It was in an abandoned hut, shivering from cold and exhaustion, that she found her first true ally in the resistance. A farmer with a stern face and kind eyes, who saw her not as a fugitive, but as a symbol. He gave her shelter, warm food, and, most importantly, a path. He was a node in a vast underground network of ordinary men and women made extraordinary by necessity, the backbone of the fight against tyranny. Joining the resistance was like rising from the ashes. She found others who shared her pain and her fury. They were teachers, artists, workers, people whose lives had been ripped away and who now dedicated themselves to a single cause. Welcomed into this new circle, she realized that her intimate knowledge of the enemy, her experience inside the machine, was an invaluable asset. The woman they had underestimated now held the keys to their secrets. Her mentor in the resistance was a man named Jiang, a former history professor who saw war not just as a series of battles, but as a clash of ideas. He taught her to channel her anger, to transform it from a consuming fire into focused strategic energy. From him, she learned the art of sabotage, intelligence gathering, and using the enemy's psychology against him. Her first missions were small but meaningful. Cutting a telegraph line, smuggling messages, guiding a downed pilot to safety. Each successful operation was a small victory, a note of defiance struck amid the din of oppression. She moved through the night, her face hidden, her purpose clear. The woman who had previously barely dared to look up now looked the enemy straight in the face, even from the shadows. The support of his new family was the foundation of his courage. Before each mission, there was a firm handshake, a knowing look, a silent promise to care for one another. They shared not only the risks, but also the rare moments of joy. A song sung in low voices, a story shared around a hidden campfire. It was these human bonds that made them invincible, far more so than any weapon they possessed. Her reputation began to grow, first as a whisper among resistance members, then as a feared rumor among German outposts. They spoke of a lady of the night, a phantom who attacked and disappeared without a trace. Officers who had previously dismissed her as insignificant now found their plans thwarted and their troops, demoralized by an enemy they could not identify. The most profound challenge came when she had to return to the neighborhood of her former prison camp for a crucial mission. Facing the ghosts of her past, walking the same roads where she had once been herded like cattle, required a strength she hadn't known she possessed. But as she looked at the walls that once contained her, she felt not fear, but a cold, determined fury. Those walls were no longer the limit of her world, but a target on her map. Her team's support was vital at that moment. They protected her, created the necessary diversions, and relied on her knowledge of the terrain. The mission was a resounding success, resulting in the liberation of dozens of prisoners and the destruction of important records. It was the turning point, the moment she went from being just a resistance fighter to a legend, the embodiment of vengeance for those she left behind. She learned that human support lies not only in physical comfort, but in shared belief. The faith her companions placed in her became a mirror, reflecting a strength she herself was only beginning to understand. They saw in her the embodiment of their own hope, proof that resistance was not futile. Her journey proves that even in the deepest darkness, human connection is the guiding light. No one wins a war alone. Every act of courage is sustained by countless acts of support, both visible and invisible. Her story is not just about one woman, but about the network of humanity that refused to let the darkness win. And now I turn to you, who have walked with me through this journey of shadows and light. We have seen you at your lowest point and witnessed your ascension. We pause at this moment in history to feel the weight and wonder of your transformation. It is a moment that invites us to look within ourselves and ask a fundamental question about the nature of our own strength. Faced with a seemingly insurmountable challenge, when all doors close and hope seems like an empty word, what do you believe is the greatest source of strength a person can find within themselves? Is it the memory of a lost love? Is it anger at injustice? Is it an unshakable faith in a better future? There is no right or wrong answer, for the strength of the human soul has many sources. The purpose of this question is not just to spark reflection, but to create a current of empathy right here in our space. By sharing your perspective, you're not just typing words on a screen. You're reaching out to others seeking strength in their own struggles. Your words could be the beacon someone, somewhere, needed to see today. We're building a mosaic of human resilience together. To honor the indomitable spirit of our protagonist and all who resisted tyranny, I asked that you leave a mark of your presence in this community. Comment with the phrase, "The flame never goes out." May these 4 words serve as a mantra, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, the light of courage, hope, and resistance may be small, but it will never be completely extinguished. By doing so, you join a chorus of voices that echoes through time, celebrating the human capacity to transform suffering into power. Our comment section becomes a living memorial, a testament to the fire that burns within each of us. And now let's explore the tools she used to forge her destiny, the keys to her incredible transformation from victim to hunter. The first tool, and perhaps the most fundamental, was resilience. But we shouldn't confuse resilience with mere passive resistance. It's not just about enduring, about bearing the weight of the world. Her resilience was an active force, the ability to absorb life's hardest blows and metabolize pain, transforming it into fuel. It was an alchemy of the soul, converting lead into gold, despair into determination. Her time as a prisoner, which should have broken her, became her greatest armor. She had faced the worst of humanity, had lived through a daily hell. As a result, the threats and dangers of life in the resistance, which would paralyze an ordinary person, seemed less intimidating. Fear still existed, but it no longer ruled her. She recognized it as an old acquaintance and put it in its proper place, as a warning tool, not a chain. We see the practical application of her resilience in a specific mission to sabotage a railway bridge during a harsh winter. The team faced freezing temperatures, hunger, and the constant risk of discovery. While others trembled and doubted, she moved with eerie calm. The memory of the cold in her cell, far worse and hopeless, became a source of strength. That past suffering was now a reference point that made the present challenge bearable, almost trivial in comparison. Resilience, then, was her anchor. It kept her from being swept away by the storms of fear and doubt that drowned so many others. It was proof that what didn't kill her not only strengthened her but made her incredibly dangerous to her enemies. They could wound her body, but her spirit, forged in the fires of adversity, had become unbreakable, a material they could neither comprehend nor destroy. The second tool was ingenuity, the ultimate weapon of the powerless. When you don't have armies, tanks, or planes, your mind becomes your battlefield and your greatest artillery. Her ingenuity flourished in scarcity. She learned to see the potential in ordinary objects, to see solutions where others saw only dead ends. It was the art of transforming the everyday into the mortal, the insignificant into the strategic. Her greatest advantage was the way her enemies underestimated her. They were looking for soldiers, for men with guns. They never expected the mastermind behind their greatest logistical problems to be a woman they had dismissed as weak and irrelevant. She used this invisibility like a cloak, moving and operating in ways completely unexpected to the rigid, hierarchical German military mentality. A brilliant example of her ingenuity was a plan to disrupt a supply convoy. Lacking sufficient explosives, she organized a group of local women and children to scatter broken glass and sharpened nails, hidden under a thin layer of dust, across miles of road. Meanwhile, another group used mirrors to reflect sunlight and momentarily blind drivers on a dangerous curve, causing a massive pileup. It was effective, low-cost, and psychologically devastating sabotage. Ingenuity became her signature. She taught her resistance cell to think like her, to use the enemy's resources against them, to turn the landscape into a weapon and German arrogance itself into a vulnerability. She fought not with brute force, but with intelligence, becoming a fluid and unpredictable threat that they could not contain because they could not even understand her tactics. The third and most powerful tool was his quest for justice. It wasn't blind, hateful revenge, though anger was certainly part of the driving force. It was something deeper, more focused. It was the desire to rebalance the scales, to make those who committed unspeakable atrocities face the consequences. Every act of resistance was a verdict. Every operation a sentence carried out on behalf of those who could no longer speak. This pursuit of justice gave her actions a moral purpose that sustained her. She wasn't just destroying. She was paving the way for a future where tyranny would not reign. This set her apart from her enemies. They fought for power and conquest. She fought for memory and dignity. This clarity of purpose was a shield against the brutality of war, preventing her from losing herself in the very hatred she fought. A pivotal moment came when she obtained information about the location of an SS officer known for his sadistic cruelty in the camp. Instead of a simple assassination, she orchestrated a plan to capture him alive and hand over his diaries, which detailed his crimes, to the Allies. The operation was extremely risky, but for her, justice demanded more than his death. It required exposing his evil to the world, ensuring that he would be remembered not as a soldier, but as a monster. This quest for justice turned her into the German officer's worst nightmare. She wasn't just a saboteur. She was a conscience, a walking reminder of their crimes. Her presence in the region signified that there was no impunity, that the shadows had eyes, and that justice, even if delayed, would find a way. She became the embodiment of moral law in a lawless land, a force of nature they had awakened and could now no longer control. Her vision of her new reality was painted with the smells of gunpowder and damp earth. Life after the transformation was an existence in the shadows, but they were shadows of her own choosing. Her fear was no longer that of a cornered victim, but the calculated tension of a hunter. The world was no longer a prison, but a chessboard where she moved the pieces with deadly precision, anticipating the moves of an opponent now predictable in its arrogance. The whispers in German taverns and garrisons built her myth. They spoke of Die Geisterfrau, the ghost woman. They told stories of sentry posts found empty, of plans that fell apart in chaos because of a single leaked detail, of officers who woke to a warning message on their desks. The panic she instilled was a weapon as powerful as any explosive, corroding enemy morale from the inside out. Sansa Riley, her new life was a stark contrast to her previous one. The gray dormancy of the camp was replaced by the vibrancy of the forest. The sound of her silent footsteps on dry leaves replaced the shuffling of prisoners' feet. The taste of food shared with comrades, however meager, was a feast compared to the starvation rations. She was alive in a way she hadn't been in years, every sense heightened by the need for survival and purpose. The impact of their actions was visible across the landscape. A train derailed in a ravine, a vital bridge turned into twisted ruins, a supply depot reduced to ashes. Each of these events was a direct blow to the heart of the war machine, delaying schedules, diverting resources, and sowing distrust within the German command. They weren't just fighting. They were crippling their enemy, methodically, piece by piece. The historic change she helped create was palpable. The local resistance, once scattered and demoralized, found in her a rallying point, an unlikely leader. Her audacity was contagious, inspiring others to take risks, to believe that victory was possible. Hope, once a luxury, became a shared commodity, a vital resource for the long and arduous struggle that still lay ahead. To the officers who knew her, the transformation was incomprehensible and terrifying. The face of the prisoner they had barely noticed now haunted them in their reports and in their nightmares. She had become living proof of their failure, not only military but moral. They had tried to erase her humanity and instead transformed her into a force of nature, a personification of justice come to settle accounts. The sense of historic change was like the smell of rain after a long drought. There was a new energy in the air, a realization that the oppressor's power was not absolute. Her actions and those of her network demonstrated that the will of a people united in a just cause was a force to be reckoned with. The new reality was one in which fear was beginning to shift sides. The ultimate impact of her actions was the liberation of the city near the camp. It wasn't a major battle with tanks and armies, but a death by 1,000 cuts. Her intelligence guided Allied airstrikes, her sabotage prevented the arrival of reinforcements, and her guerrilla operations demoralized the garrison to the point of surrendering almost without a fight. She saw the flag of freedom raised where before there had been only tyranny. In that moment, looking into the faces of the liberated citizens, she saw the true meaning of her journey. The pain, the flight, the struggle all culminated in that vision of a new reality. She had not merely survived her nightmare. She had dismantled it and built a future from its ruins, ensuring that no one else would have to endure what she had. Her post-war life was peaceful, anonymous by choice. The lioness became a woman again, but carrying the scars and wisdom of her journey. The new reality she enjoyed was not one of great riches or fame, but the deep and priceless peace of knowing she was master of her own days, a freedom she had won with blood, ingenuity, and an iron will. Her story, like that of so many unsung heroes of that conflict, is more than a war story. It is a lasting testament to the human capacity to rewrite our own destiny. It is a beacon that illuminates the darkest corners of our history, not to frighten us, but to remind us of the light that can always be found, even when all hope seems lost. These narratives are a refuge for the spirit. They show us that history isn't just about kings, generals, and dates. It's about ordinary people faced with extraordinary circumstances, who discover within themselves a strength they didn't know they possessed. If you believe these flames of memory need to be kept burning, that these voices from the past deserve to be heard by future generations, then I invite you to join our community. Subscribe to our channel. This isn't just a click of a button. It's an act of belonging. It's your declaration that history matters, that lessons of courage and resilience are timeless and essential. By subscribing, you're not just supporting the creation of more videos like this. You're becoming a memory keeper, a member of a legion dedicated to ensuring these stories never disappear. Here, In this space, we honor the past to understand the present and build a better future. Welcome to our refuge. Welcome home.